So I'm going to give you an introduction to the European health data space. This is not a long lecture on the topic, but rather a quick heads up to warm you up for some really thoughtful and interesting panel discussions and further sessions throughout these 2 days. So just a few slides actually from the European Commission to start us off, setting the context really for the European health data space. And this fits inside a very broad, overarching European strategy for data, with the vision that health data and other sectoral data serve the purpose of Europe by enabling better quality services and better rights to individuals, that systems such as health systems can be made more effective and more efficient, and that innovation is stimulated and that Europe becomes a global leader in innovations that are powered through better uses of data, but in parallel that our values and our rules about how we look after data are respected, and that the spaces for data that are created are fair in all sorts of ways. When we turn to health in particular, we know that there are a number of barriers, and these are just a few examples from the Commission. The first one being that individuals don't have much opportunity to really exercise their rights to control what happens to their data and even accessing their own data, that health professionals often have difficulty accessing data that they need to deliver the best possible care to their patients, and those people who are part of innovating with digital health services and products have difficulties getting hold of enough data, the right kind of data to help them with what they need to do. Policymakers need more data to be more evidence-based in what they do, and of course the whole research sector desperately needs more data. So that's our starting point really, and that is the framework environment for the European health data space, which is a proposed regulation on European health data. And it sets out a set of rules, infrastructures, and importantly, a governance environment so that individuals can have better access and control around their own personal health data, that there is a framework that allows the data to be reused for purposes like research and policy making, and that we are then able to bring together European scale data to help foster a vibrant innovation sector. Now, I've referred to health, but in fact, the European health data space is one of a number of sectoral data spaces that the Commission is proposing, but unusually, health is the first. So out of all of the sectors that are normally easier to deal with, us difficult customers in the health sector have somehow become first to be chosen. So well done, Commission, for giving us first ranking in terms of order of priority. But perhaps it's because the health sector so urgently needs what is being proposed here. What I would like to do is to then show you a series of circles that is my way of describing what's inside this very large regulation. So please accept this is my way of summarizing it. So firstly, that the EHDS divides its agenda into two broad headings. It has a set of measures that are help to support the primary use of data, which is the use of data for the care to individuals to maximize their health and their wellness. And the aims of the regulation in this green zone, the primary use zone, is that people have increasing control about their data, that there is better exchange across the diverse kinds of data that is needed in health, which is of course electronic health records, but also genomic data, patient registries and so on. And then when we come to the secondary use or the reuse of data for research and strategic matters, there are a series of actors, those involved in research, those innovators and policymakers, regulators, people also involved in public health, all have access to electronic health data for a number of purposes that you can see on this slide that are to do with healthcare and research and policy making. Now, if we start with the green zone, the primary use zone of health data, there is now in the regulation that the electronic health record data should be quality checked, that electronic health records should know if health data is complete and is consistent with the data that is meant to be captured. And secondly, that there is a really strong push in the regulation towards interoperability with particular emphasis on the agreed cross-border standards, the European Electronic Health Record Exchange format, which is a portfolio of standards dealing with things like patient summaries, medication, and some things like lab results. So this is really pushed strongly by the regulation. Then when it comes to upholding the rights of individuals, that individuals should be able to access from within their country a consolidated view of their electronic health records. That means not having to go to multiple organizations and request from each one, but they should be able to go to a one-stop location and say, I want the data that your health system holds on me, that they must be able to have it free. Also, that the regulation proposes that patients should be able to contribute their own information and perspectives into their electronic health records, although they will be clearly labeled as being patient entered. And portability, which you all know from the GDPR, that people must be allowed to take copies of their data and authorize them to go to another party, like another healthcare provider, if they wish. That countries should use their national contact points and, if needed, other nominated bodies to oversee the delivery of the green zone of things. There is in the proposal that electronic health record systems should in future all be certified so that the data and their behavior with data is trustworthy, that certification to some extent should be extended to apps that people use more personally, and that all countries are now expected to join something called My Health at EU, which is the European superhighway for exchanging patient summaries, prescriptions, and other data, so that individuals in Europe can enjoy a safe continuity of care wherever they are in Europe. And finally, the regulation does specify the importance of persons having control over the access that is granted to their personal health data. Now we come to the secondary use side of things, and there's also an emphasis, an even stronger emphasis, on the quality labeling of data sets. That is, that the data sets should have been assessed for their quality before you make them widely available. There is an indirect mention of the FAIR principles that you are hopefully mostly familiar with relating to metadata, but there is a requirement for metadata specification, and also that there should be entries for data sets in catalogs at national and European levels. So basically, people who want to make use of data for secondary purposes can discover it through catalogs, they can appreciate what they've got through the metadata, and then they know the quality of what they're accessing through quality labels. There is a very strong and I think really exciting proposal for how data should be made available. And the European Health Data Space Regulation specifies a set of purposes, secondary use purposes that should be permitted. And these are really about making sure that data are used ethically. So there is a list of purposes and there is a list of misuses that should be prohibited. I think they're very sensible, and I would encourage you to look at those. They represent a very helpful high-level summary of good and non-good uses of data. There is a framework for how fees should be determined for accessing data, so that with the aim that the fees basically support cost recovery, but don't encourage profiteering and exploitation of data. There are rules about the majority of secondary uses occurring with anonymized data, and it says why and how it should be possible, if you really need it, to access pseudonymized data instead. The regulation proposes that there are data access bodies, some of which may already exist in some countries, others may need to be established, whose job it is to oversee the blue zone, and they should provide data through safe havens, that data is not just given to everybody, but that the data is placed in a secure, audited environment where the person who's requested access can run their queries, run their analyses, examine the data, but large data sets are not flying around all over Europe, and that there is to be a European superhighway for research data sets and secondary use data sets that member states will be encouraged to join. And finally, but importantly, the regulation strongly emphasizes transparency to the public. Now, if uses of data are anonymized, I can't tell you that I've used your data, but I should be able to declare what kinds of data I have used for what purposes, and the data access bodies are encouraged to publish regularly transparency about the permissions they've granted, to whom and for what purposes. So a final slide just to round off really. That I would say that in all of the communities I've engaged with, the regulation has been broadly welcomed right across Europe. Now, of course, there will be parts of the regulation that some people will be a bit anxious about and concerned about. But overall, I think the idea that at a European level, we have a real powerful signal of how should data be regarded, how should data be looked after, how should it be used, and how should it be safeguarded, is really important for us all to scale up the uses of data. Now, there are some parts, and I've put a few examples here, the citizen control, certification of EHR systems, the decision access, the data access body decision-making need more detailed work. A regulation can't have all of the fine-grained content there. So implementing legislation will follow, and we all need to be playing a role in helping to make sure that detail is really workable and benefits from a huge amount of expertise already available in Europe. Some of the timelines are quite ambitious, and we're hearing that some member states are anxious about delivering on time, but I would prefer to see that we are a bit forgiving about the time, but we really aim for the same ambition across Europe. That alignment across Europe is itself very, very powerful. And my closing remark is this one really in bold, because the European Health Data Space Regulation is not arriving into a European vacuum. There are many initiatives already that are scaling up data use. Some of these are national health data infrastructures, hubs, and platforms. Some of them are cross-European, dealing with things like observational data or genomic data or rare diseases. And so what we are seeing from many of those initiatives is that the EHDS is not only proposing to build something, it's giving guidance to the whole of Europe about how we should set a pan-European ecosystem for data in a more harmonized way. And what I hope is that a lot of those initial initiatives that already exist will themselves embrace the regulations, rules and principles and governance models as a direction of travel, so that eventually all of the data ecosystems within Europe behave in similar ways and give those whose data it is, that is our patients, our citizens, and those who need to use the data, a consistent environment all over Europe. So I guess from the tone of my voice, you've heard that I'm excited by this. So I feel very positive, and I'm looking forward to the discussions in the rest of the meeting with great appetite.